Hi everyone. So I'm going to try the thing that they tell you never to do, which is a live demo. And I'm going to make it interactive as well, so that you have to shout out from the audience. It's going to be great. Okay, so what I'm going to talk about. So for some context, so I mentioned it a bit this morning, so I work for this company, Altmetric. We've been around for 6 or 7 years now. And what we do is we collect all the data around articles or research outputs really online. So if it's online and it's related to a piece of research, we want to kind of collect in one place. And the reason we do that kind of depends on what kind of user you are. So for individual researchers, what we're trying to do is give you evidence that you can go and take and use on your CV or in a grant proposal or anything else, anywhere where you might need to prove that you've kind of gotten your work out there or you've had some sort of impact with your work. So that's one side of it. Another side is for research administrators or anyone who works with a body of research and they need to do the same kind of thing, but at more of an aggregate level. So if you think about, preparing ref case studies or something, you work at a department and there's, potentially hundreds of papers. Can you make the job of sorting through those easier? You get some kind of automated hints. A third one is around discovery, and I'll come to how you can get access to these tools in a minute. But discovery, so just answering questions about how research is communicated. Who is it that's doing the communicating? Are particular topics hot or not at the moment? This kind of thing. And we make the data available in a few different ways. I'm going to demo this one, which is called the Explorer tool here, but there's lots of different ways into the data. So the main ones are, first of all, if you're a librarian, you can get free access to the tool. There's a little form you fill in on the website, and that goes straight through. If you're a researcher, so if you're doing a research project, an academic research project, you can get access to the data and explore for free. Again, you have to fill in a form on the website. And that's kind of two ways in for a lot of people, but the other ones are typically a publisher will buy this tool and give access to everyone who works for the publisher, or an institution will buy site license access for everyone in the institution. So there's a few different ways in depending on what you want to do. But the Explorer, so that's this tool here. And what it's doing is, by default, across an entire database, just showing you what research outputs are in there and what kind of attention they've been getting. So I don't know if people are familiar with the kind of Altmetric visualization or not. That's these kind of colorful donut things, or bagels apparently this morning. And the colors represent, it's not like a pie chart or anything. You're not meant to pull any quantitative data from there. It's just an idea of what kind of attention that paper is getting. So in this case, I think most of them are papers anyway. And that seems a bit abstract. But if I tell you, okay, well, light blue represents Twitter, red represents mainstream media, yellow means blogs. You don't have to remember these off by heart. There's only 8 or 9 of them. But once you know that, when you're looking through a big list, and I start scrolling down, you can start seeing some patterns emerging. So this paper here has gotten some Twitter attention and news attention, but not being picked up anywhere else. A lot of the kind of top scoring ones here, we're ordering by attention, have lots of different colors, and that's because when a paper gets popular, it tends to be mentioned in a lot of different places. It's very rare for a paper to be very popular on Twitter but not picked up anywhere else. It doesn't happen. In fact, that's one of the signs that someone's gaming the system and paying for bots or something. So here's the interactive part. Has anyone got a keyword, a topic that I can spell? And say Ebola? Okay, cool. That's a good one. So how you use the tool is, okay, actually let me do this first. So normally when you work for a publisher or an institution, there's kind of 2 views of the database. One is just research outputs from your institution or your set of journals. Another one is the entire database. So if we were looking at, okay, what things from my institution mentioning Ebola are getting attention, in this case, we're at a fake university, Lilliput University, but that would be, Cambridge or Duke or wherever you are. In this case, there's 2 items. They're actually data sets on Figshare, interestingly. rather than articles. And if I click on them, I get the details. It's quite low resolution screen, but I get the details of where they're mentioned, and what the Twitter attention is and what the news attention is. So the important part to take away here, you don't need to pay attention to a lot of this detail, is you've got some numbers down the left-hand side, and on the right-hand side there's more detail. Especially important is the actual mentions. So the idea behind Altmetrics is there are some numbers, but they're always backed up with the actual evidence, the actual mentions. So if we say there's 4 news stories behind us related to an article, you can go and see those 4 news stories. If we say there's 10 tweets, you can go and see the tweets for yourself, this kind of thing. What you want to avoid in metrics is anything that's not auditable, anything where you can't go and see for yourself where the attention is coming from. Intuitively, you can think of things like spam on Facebook. So the Russian trolls stuff recently in Facebook saying 250 million of our accounts are kind of fake. That's why you need to be able to go and see the data. And typically, it's obvious when you go, people say, how do you spot gaming and things? It's obvious. When you go and see the tweets from a kind of paper that's bought attention on Twitter, the avatar things are, cash for gold and roulette wheels and, women in bikinis and things like, ones that are obviously not kind of scholarly attention, traditional scholarly attention. So in this case, we clicked on a Figshare data set, and it's been mentioned in the news, so it's been mentioned in the International Business Times, that's kind of an online news site, and it's been mentioned on Twitter as well, and we can see the actual tweets. So that's within your institution, you're answering a particular question there. The other view is kind of a more across all of research kind of topics type view. So again, if I search for Ebola, so now I'm searching not just from my fictional university, but across the entire internet. And we can see there's quite a few articles. I can't see the number. Oh, here it is in the corner. So it says there's 5,200 research outputs, because again, they could be books, they could be data sets. That's why it doesn't say articles. There's 156,800 mentions of those outputs. So that could be tweets, could be blog posts, news stories, policy documents, this kind of thing, from 15 different sources of attention. Again, I could click through to get the details, but what I'm going to do in this case, just because it's a very short demo, is click on this Analyze These Mentions tab. And this is where we can see over time what the kind of pattern of attention looks like. So for Ebola, at least research articles associated with Ebola, there's this big spike in October 2014, and then it trails off a little bit, and it's a bit bumpy every so often. And we can switch to just looking at, for example, news items. So again, when you're looking, so in this case, we're not looking at all types of mention, but just at one particular kind. So mentions in news articles about these research outputs, and we can see there's kind of 2 peaks, one in 2014, and then again in January 2017. And we might go, why are those mentions there? We could restrict the time frame there or any other number of things. But by drilling in, by making all this data available, the underlying data, we can also filter it. So we could say, okay, well, let's just see what were those news stories about Ebola outputs talking about. It is running in the background. It's a loading indicator. This is why people don't do live demos. It's the loading times. All right, there you go. So now these are all the news stories about Ebola research. We can drill down a bit deeper, and we can say, show us all the stories about Ebola research from the New York Times, for example. And we got there, Ebola's legacy. Looks like there's a few different articles. An opinion piece on pharma, only 6 nations have evaluated readiness for a global pandemic, this kind of thing. And you can do that for any combination of news outlets. So a typical use case for us would be a comms office at a publisher, cares about the attention the articles they're publishing are getting in general, but they're specifically interested in normally, 30, 40 kind of high profile normally, or media outlets, or ones that have particular meaning to them. Equally, from a funder perspective, you can think about outlets with a particular, particular vertical, or a particular way of reaching patients, or things like Australian Doctor, or magazines and things with a specific vertical. Okay, the last thing I'm going to show there is, having done all these searches, you can save it, which isn't a super surprising piece of functionality. But then, once you've done that, you can create these shareable reports. So this is normally if there's one person in the organization working with Altmetric tools, or one librarian or whatever, you can go in, you create a query that's relevant to your research, and then you can create these shareable reports that have the kind of top level view of it. And all the articles in this report are kind of unlocked. Everyone can go in and see all of the details. You can kind of customize it, which I'm not going to go into now, but to say, maybe we don't want a breakdown of all these types, just some of them. And then you can email it or print it off as a PDF. All right, thanks. I'm going to leave it there. Go to the website, or have a talk with me later on if you're interested in learning more. Thank you.